Anita Sarkeesian made a Kickstarter page for a proposed video series called Tropes vs. Women in Video Games, a revisiting of her 2011 series, Tropes vs. Women.
Have you ever noticed that, with a few notable exceptions, basically all female characters in video games fall into a small handful of cliches and stereotypes?
We are determined to stop a situation in which video games with pornographic and violent content are being peddled to our children. And I understand that.
In addition to being loads of fun to play,
they are certainly entertaining and even educational in many instances.
Research has found that gaming can improve problem-solving skills, teamwork, creative thought, and multitasking.
They can help our children learn. They can increase hand-eye coordination
and enhance perceptual and cognitive abilities.
Art serves itself. The first step in assaulting an art form is to praise false or irrelevant merits. When teaching art, the lesson is art. So when people talk of educational value in art, they are implicitly denying the existence of an inherent value. Anita Sarkeesian and Hillary Clinton both make sure to stress that games are fun, can encourage teamwork, and can improve hand-eye coordination, not as a concession to the importance of video games, but as an assault on their meaning. They could just as easily be describing a ball game. To them, art serves as a tool for tricking people into learning or believing in something. Hillary says that video games are being misused to teach violence. Anita says video games are being misused to teach misogyny.
And I've heard some conflicting reports as to whether or not people in this committee want legislation.
When the PMRC held hearings to determine how to label and censor music records, Frank Zappa proposed attaching pamphlets with song lyrics on them, or promoting classical music appreciation in schools. Nearly 30 years later, we have this meaningless logo plastered on music albums, no attached lyric sheets, and no support for music appreciation courses. Music was too self-serving and abstract, and its relevance to mathematics too complex for censors to find a way of sterilizing it. And the case is the same with video games. Already, there are PEGI and ESRB logos taking up space on video game box art, but what would Anita propose as a solution to the rampant sexism in games? In all of her videos thus far, she has never specified a solution, because she aims for her viewers to internalize the censorship and force it onto others in the personal sector before breaching the legal sector.
Apparently, they insist on purchasing the works of contemporary recording artists in order to support a personal illusion of aerobic sophistication. Ladies, please be advised, the $8.98 purchase price does not entitle you to a kiss on the foot from the composer or performer in exchange for a spin on the family Victrola.
It's always been popular to call for voluntary censorship, but who is it going to be voluntary for? Individuals or companies? In the game industry's current atmosphere, there is a predominant demand for voluntary censorship of both.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's hardly voluntary.
Anita is strongly opposed to artistic portrayals of sex, violence, sexual violence, kinky sex, sexy women, women who are weak, women who are strong, women who are dumb, women who are cunning. She's also against things that arouse men, things that appeal to men, things that seem like men, and anything that blurs the difference between women and men.
I felt like feminism was sort of trapped in academic spaces and politically radical spaces.
Of course she's a radical feminist, but she isn't the radical feminist. At this point, most active Western feminism falls under the category of radical. The important thing to recognize about the feminist movement is that for the past 3 decades, it has been experiencing a massive internal conflict known as the feminist sex war. There are 2 sides in this conflict. On one side, pro-censorship, anti-sex feminists like Sarkeesian. On the other, feminists who identify as sex positive.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with the type of feminism that Anita Sarkeesian adheres to, and while I'm all for having a strong feminist voice on the internet, as a female feminist gamer, she does not represent me. There are a lot of reasons why sex-positive feminists here on YouTube really don't like her. Very much of her analysis is incredibly overreaching and attempts to find sexism in music or television that isn't really there.
Sex-positive feminism recognizes sexual liberation for women. To varying degrees, it accepts the existence of sex and sex work on the premise that women should be in charge of what they do with their own bodies. There's feminist porn and feminist BDSM. What's important to recognize is that anti-sex feminism is opposed to women having this freedom. Anti-sex feminism thinks that women who want to express their sexuality don't know what's for their own good. The dictionary that Anita works from provides her with a definitional bias and entangles hatred of women with jokes and pornography. She necessitates debate on the semantic and etymological level.
I'm not entirely sure what the criteria is that anti-sex work feminists use to determine whether or not a woman is being objectified. I've been trying to figure that out for quite a while now.
The feminist sex debate suffers from an imbalance due to the nature of anti-sex feminism, with far more to rally against and a penchant for suppressing and ignoring opposing views. The anti-sex feminists find themselves easily dominating discussions, as well as feminism's public perception. Anita is a perfect example of this. Out of 33 of her videos, not a single one chooses to acknowledge opposing feminist views, or examine or explain her own views, but thanks to her Kickstarter, she is now the face of feminism for the gaming media.
I feel that that hurts feminists as a whole because she is a popular feminist on the internet who kind of gives a lot of feminists a bad name about how, we see sexism and everything.
On her blog, however, Anita does briefly recognize the opposing view in a post covering the slut walks. She states that she is alienated with feminism. Why does she refer to the slut walk as representative of all feminism? Is she even aware of the existence of sex-positive feminism and the difference between it and her own stance? And why is somebody who describes themselves as alienated with feminism running a YouTube channel called Feminist Frequency? The slut walk, regardless of one's views on it, is revolutionary in nature. It aims to transform and shift perceptions of a word by claiming it. Anita's stance, which clings to the preservation of word meanings in order to censor them, is conservative. But censorship in the strict sense isn't exactly what Anita practices. She doesn't have a clear-cut method of determining what should be allowed. She doesn't always block comments out of profanity or insults, and we have no way of knowing whether she approves every comment which politely disagrees. Sometimes, rather than filter through comments, she closes them altogether and even deletes the entire section. She disables video ratings when she feels like it, and deletes videos when she realizes they reflect poorly on her. On the occasion that she responds to critical comments, it's always with a quip or retort in hand, and never does she correct herself or admit to being wrong. In her corner of the internet, opinions don't exist until she decides they are convenient. She allows comments solely based on their strategic value to her, and has said so herself. She exploits existing dissent to create the illusion of an organized and coordinated enemy, and then speaks out against the enemy. Her Kickstarter video is exemplary of this. She deleted the comment sections of the 2 videos preceding it in order to funnel angry YouTubers into the only open discussion she has ever facilitated, and closed the discussion when her Kickstarter ended. Her motive? To prove that misogyny was a problem. If that proof had existed all along, why hadn't she used it or allowed it before? The only difference between her Kickstarter video and any of the other videos was that it was going to make her money, and the only difference between leaving the comment section open indefinitely and closing it once the Kickstarter was over was that the comments no longer served to make a profit. Sarkeesian was happy to censor comments until she stood to benefit from the misogyny that she claimed to be so against. Video game journalists spin this as an ironic failure of her detractors, but what it really signifies is corruption on her part. When she made her Kickstarter, she decided from the beginning that she was going to advertise herself not as a pop culture critic, but as a battleground. After initially opening her video's comment section, she made a blog post showing off those comments and denouncing all of them as harassment. Then she made a blog post about her Wikipedia vandalism, stressing that, among other things, a pornographic image had been placed on the page. While the statement behind that image was clear, there was no reason to hide the facts that it was one of the many unerotic educational images hosted directly on Wikimedia Commons for use on Wikipedia. She made a post listing all of the interviews and articles that she's been featured in, which conspicuously leaves out the only remotely critical professional article that has yet been written about her. And she has a post that lists a number of image macros and satires that offended her. Before denouncing those image macros as obscene or unacceptable, her supporters should look at what she wrote. She says it's okay to ridicule someone that way, as long as they're part of the status quo. Nowhere does she respond to any of the growing number of calm, well-reasoned arguments and videos that have been made criticizing her. Her operating principle is, if you ignore people until they insult you, they'll be reasonable until they want to be heard. She abuses this principle to her fullest extent. It isn't brave of her to continue with tropes versus women, it's the bare minimum. With $150,000 in her pocket, stopping now is beyond out of the question. All she is going to do is make the same videos she's always made, while perpetuating the same manipulated discussion. That's where her story will end. It's the story of a woman who said something irksome and then celebrated when people said hateful things in return. And the same way that she was able to rely on the existence of angry people on the internet, video game journalists were able to rely on the existence of somebody like her. Nothing about her message is unique or original. She simply added up at the right time for professional blogs and news sites to take her for a ride. She got some money, and they got some money. And after the first few tropes versus women videos are released, she'll either be swept under the rug or given a place on the shelf, along with Movie Bob and exit credits.